Welcome to Future Epoch, where we learn more about our world. In 2015, Volkswagen was one of the most respected car manufacturers on the planet. Its diesel engines had been celebrated as a triumph of German engineering, clean, efficient, powerful, and a genuine alternative to the petrol car. Governments recommended them. Environmentalists tolerated them. Consumers bought them in their millions. It was all built on a lie. Diesel engines have always carried a complicated reputation. They are more fuel efficient than petrol engines and produce less carbon dioxide per kilometer, which made them attractive to policymakers trying to meet climate targets during the 1990s and 2000s. But diesel combustion also produces nitrogen oxides, a family of gases abbreviated as NOx, that are directly harmful to human health. NOx reacts in the atmosphere to form ground-level ozone and fine particulate matter, which cause respiratory disease, cardiovascular damage, and premature death. Because of this, every major car market in the world sets strict legal limits on NOx emissions. To sell a vehicle, manufacturers must demonstrate compliance, not just in theory, but through standardized laboratory tests that regulators use to certify every new model. That certification process turned out to be the vulnerability Volkswagen decided to exploit. The decision to install defeat device software was not a snap judgment made in a moment of crisis. It was a deliberate, engineered choice made years in advance. By the mid-2000s, Volkswagen had committed itself publicly to a clean diesel strategy it called TDI, turbocharged direct injection. The company wanted to crack the American market with diesel cars at a time when American regulators maintained some of the strictest NOx emission standards in the world. The problem was that genuinely meeting those standards, while also delivering the fuel economy and performance Volkswagen was promising in its marketing, was technically extremely difficult. The company faced a choice between investing heavily in expensive after-treatment systems or finding another way. They found another way. Engineers developed software that could detect when a vehicle was undergoing an official emissions test. The detection relied on recognizing a specific combination of factors present during standardized laboratory testing: steering wheel position, vehicle speed patterns, barometric pressure, and the duration of engine operation. When those conditions matched a test cycle, the car's emission control systems ran at full capacity. The moment the car left the test environment and entered normal road driving, those controls switched to a reduced mode to improve performance and fuel economy. The result was stark. In real-world conditions, affected vehicles were emitting nitrogen oxides at levels between 10 and 40 times above the legal limit. Volkswagen sold approximately 11 million vehicles fitted with this software worldwide, around 500,000 of them in the United States, across model years from 2009 to 2016. For years, the deception held. The unraveling began not with a regulator, but with a small team of researchers at West Virginia University. In 2013, they were conducting a study for the International Council on Clean Transportation, a non-profit organization, comparing diesel vehicle emissions in Europe with those in the United States. Their methodology was straightforward. They attached portable emissions monitoring equipment to vehicles and drove them on real roads. When they tested a Volkswagen Jetta and a Volkswagen Passat, the results were startling. The cars performed well within legal limits in the laboratory. On the road, the NOx readings were dramatically higher, far beyond anything that could be explained by normal variation or test cycle differences. The researchers passed their findings to the California Air Resources Board and the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Regulators then confronted Volkswagen directly. Over the following year and a half, Volkswagen offered a series of technical explanations and software updates, claiming the anomalies were the result of technical faults rather than deliberate deception. Those updates did not resolve the problem. By September 2015, the EPA had run out of patience. On the 18th of September, it issued a formal notice of violation to Volkswagen AG. The agency stated plainly that Volkswagen had installed defeat device software in its diesel vehicles, that this software was illegal under the Clean Air Act, and that the company had knowingly deceived federal regulators for years. Volkswagen initially attempted to deny the most serious elements of the accusation. Within days, the position became untenable. On the 22nd of September, Chief Executive Martin Winterkorn issued a public apology and announced the company would set aside €6.5 billion to cover the immediate costs of the scandal. Days later, he resigned. The cover was gone. The scale of what Volkswagen had done was now a matter of public record. The consequences were historic in their scale. In the United States, Volkswagen agreed in January 2017 to plead guilty to 3 criminal felony counts and to pay $4.3 billion in combined criminal and civil penalties to the Department of Justice and the EPA, at the time the largest criminal fine ever levied against an automaker in American history. The company also committed to a separate civil settlement worth up to $14.7 billion, which included a buyback program for affected vehicles and compensation payments to owners. Several individuals faced criminal prosecution. James Liang, a Volkswagen engineer who had worked on the defeat device project in the United States, became the first individual to plead guilty. Oliver Schmidt, the manager who led communications with American regulators during the period of deception, was convicted and sentenced to 7 years in a federal prison. In Europe, legal and regulatory proceedings moved more slowly, but the financial and reputational damage was equally severe. Germany opened its own investigations, and Volkswagen faced actions across dozens of jurisdictions. The total global cost of the scandal, fines, settlements, vehicle buybacks, and legal fees eventually exceeded $30 billion, making it one of the most expensive corporate fraud cases in history. The human cost is harder to quantify precisely, but researchers have attempted to estimate it. Studies published in environmental and public health journals concluded that the excess NOx emissions from affected vehicles in the United States were linked to hundreds of premature deaths and thousands of additional respiratory health cases. In Europe, where far more affected vehicles were driven, the projected health burden was larger still. Dieselgate is not simply a story about one dishonest company. It is a story about what happens when regulatory systems assume good faith from powerful institutions that have strong financial incentives to deceive them. The certification process for vehicle emissions was designed to be rigorous, but it was also standardized and reproducible, which made it predictable. Predictability became exploitable. Volkswagen's engineers did not discover a flaw in the physics of combustion. They discovered a flaw in the architecture of enforcement. The scandal also revealed something deeper about how large organizations treat compliance. Meeting the letter of a regulation in a test environment while violating its spirit in every real-world application is not an engineering failure. It is an ethical and cultural failure. Decisions of this kind do not happen without organizational knowledge and, in some cases, approval at significant levels of seniority. Individual engineers knew what the software did. Managers oversaw the project for years. The company marketed the results to the public. The lesson is not that diesel engines are inherently dangerous, or that all manufacturers behave this way. The lesson is that trust between regulators, industries, and the public is fragile, that it depends on verification rather than assumption, and that when it breaks down, the costs fall hardest on people who had no role in the decision and no power to prevent it. Volkswagen has paid its fines. Some of its executives have served their sentences. The company has pivoted aggressively toward electric vehicles, investing hundreds of billions in a future that runs on batteries rather than combustion. By some measures, the story of Dieselgate has an ending. But the deeper question it raises has no clean resolution. If one of the world's largest, most technically sophisticated, and most publicly scrutinized manufacturers could sustain a decade-long deception of this kind, what does that tell us about the limits of regulatory oversight in complex technical industries? What does it tell us about the pressures inside organizations that allow engineers to know something is wrong and to build it anyway? The defeat device was a technical solution to a business problem, but it was also a choice, made by people, approved through chains of command, maintained through years of active deception, and finally exposed not by a regulator, but by a small team of researchers who simply drove a car on a public road and measured what came out of the exhaust. Sometimes the most important act of accountability is also the simplest one. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel.